Hey, what's up, everyone? Excited to be back for another episode of Meet in the Middle with my pal here, Ryan from Penn Ventures. It's funny, I've been asking all my pals that are like builders or in the industry to come on podcasts, and they're terrified. But
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And Ryan came out to our middle symposium, which is also really awesome. And so, Ryan, thanks for coming here, man.
Yeah.
Ryan and I met probably back in 2017. When you were still at Curry, Canada Lands, and, kind of share a bit of a conversation. But maybe, why don't I pass it over to you, Ryan, tell your story and tell us what you're up to.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm humbled to be here, so thanks for the invite. Means a lot. And the Curry story was a big point of inflection for me. When we were chatting earlier, before we started rolling here, that in many ways, you inspired me to bridge the gap from single and semi-D product into what we now know as missing middle housing. And you actually posted on social media the other day the project that I saw for the first time, and I drove by it and I was like, what is this new build form? It was the first RCG in Marda Loop. And here we are today. So Penn has evolved. Like I had aspirations of being a developer from the time I was in university. And so coming out of my role at Curry Barracks, I felt like I had enough experience to take that plunge. And we started in 2018 with some single family and semi-D product. And then when council adopted the basement suite strategy, we were able to develop a business program around that feature. Yeah. And so put up our first 4-unit town with 4 suites integrated in 2020, right in the middle of COVID, we were building, and we've grown from there. Yeah.
It's funny. I remember the conversation when you reached out to me. We met at Neighbor, and you're kind of like, "Yo, tell me about what you're working on, what you're doing, and how it works." And I've always seen this industry as like so small, and so I've never looked at it as like, why wouldn't I share? Like, if I can help enable other people, and obviously, that's like kind of my next journey is like, how do I figure out how to help inspire other folks, the way that we've inspired each other to kind of keep going and serve a market that I feel like is widely underserved with most of our growth happening on new growth. But maybe take me back there, because I think the thing that I think people are really struggling with is like, I know this, I've been working for someone for a very long time, and that transitional gap of like making the jump. How are you able to finally say, okay, we're going to go and do this? And obviously, sharing with you is one thing. Us having a conversation, I take no credit. I give you the credit, because taking that first step is really a leap of faith. So walk me through, like, what was that like for you if you reflect back on that?
Yeah, well, the moment of decision was scary, terrifying, maybe. I was a director for a land developer with a great position in the inner city, and had an exciting path forward. But, when a seed is sown deep inside you, you can't really ignore it, is the best analogy I can give. And so there was lots of preparation leading up to that. I'm conservative by nature. I mean, even when we underwrite our projects today, I would say we're more conservative than the average developer. And so lots of preparation leading into that decision. And a support team and network of mentors around me that help guide me through those early months and years.
Yeah. And what's really like fantastic for me to hear is like, obviously you started in 2018. Since then, you're well on your way to being kind of 100 missing middle units. And so tell me a bit about like your team structure. Like how were you able to put this together? What does Penn look like for folks that are, you started with one, kind of started to move up. Well, what does that look like for you on this journey?
I think we're super unique in that regard. And it actually ties back, like we've been having conversations about your launch of middle school and, the type of people that you saw show up to that. And really that's who we were, and in many aspects still are. And so what I mean by that is that we are, and I shared this at the middle launch event, we are fully vertically integrated. And what I mean by that is that we're a small team that is seeing our projects through land acquisition all the way to a lease up and property management. We have consultants and a number of people that work with us to make that a success. But our core team is very small, and when we'll continue to keep it that way because it drives efficiency for us. It allows us to compete in an inner city context. against some of the factors that we're seeing in the market today.
Yeah, and you know what? I love that because that was one of the stories I told at middle school is people see development and they get overwhelmed because they're like, oh, you must know everything. It's like, actually, like, I know enough to be dangerous in each place, but I really rely on ancillary folks to support me through this journey.
Well, that comment ties back to your original question, is that it is overwhelming at first.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw your first 4-unit project. I saw others around where we live in Killarney.
Yeah.
And it felt like such a huge gap to jump from a single family home to 4 units with integrated suites.
Yeah.
And in many respects it is. Our challenge in this industry, which is what's cool about what you're doing, is that there is no playbook.
Yeah.
There is no licensing mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm a financial advisor, I take a course, I need to be accredited. In development, we often learn through our peer network and in my case, a group of mentors that help to guide me.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's so funny when you say that is like, I think about, I've said this now a number of times just because it resonates so much with me, like what Jim Button did with Village Brewery and how he kind of created a culture around, hey, we're not competing. Like we're trying to start a culture of craft brewery. And I see middle housing being like this new kind of subculture of, you know, new growth development. I don't think we'll ever be as big as new growth. And that's not, quite frankly, the point. But how do we start to cultivate other folks to actually participate? Because I think there's more than enough room. And, you know, what's really inspiring for me is like you're rooted in community, like you're very passionate about these communities. You're very concerned about what, you know, the integration of these products look like. And so I think a lot of people miss that. And so maybe just tell me about that. Like, you know, why choose to do this versus invest capital and other, I know it's hard. I know it's not easy at times, but, you know, talk to me about your perspective around community.
Yeah. Well, I guess the best way I can answer that question directly is that my core values personally are to create, educate, and explore.
Yeah.
And so on the create side, real estate scratches that itch for me.
Yeah.
I love to build. I always have. I referenced even in my university days, like I can remember sitting in front of the president of our university pitching a strategy to build new dormitories on site. I had lined up an investor, a construction team. We didn't see it to the finish line, but those dorms exist today.
Yeah.
And that's the fun part of development, right? And you've experienced this and still do. You build something that then is there 10 years later that you can walk past with, you know, in our case, my daughter's 8 and we walk by some of our projects on weekends and it's just really cool to see.
Yeah.
It's additive to our inner city canopy as well, in the sense that we get to know our tenants. That's one of the benefits of being integrated in this way, is that my approach to building product is changed because we know that we're keeping it, because we know that we will be face-to-face with those that are leasing from us. And so there's a level of accountability, I think, that's driven through that business style that maybe doesn't exist if you're building and selling and moving on to the next project.
Sure. How have you dealt with, Ryan, the opposition? Like, I think you're a pretty calm guy. You have a really good demeanor, but you've obviously watched and saw what the citywide exclusionary conversations and how toxic I think at times they became. How have you managed that conversation for yourself within communities and the projects that you're doing as like a family operated business?
Yeah, I mean, I tuned in and watched the public hearing. I chose not to speak because, and this view might surprise you, I'm probably more neutral than most developers on it. And I'm neutral because I have led all of our public engagement as it related to land use applications and redesignations for the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And what I've found is that at its core, NIMBYism is centered around two things. It's a fear of change, but then also the unknown.
Yeah.
And specifically the unknown of, like, you have to juxtapose what someone who's been living in a single family home in these neighborhoods for maybe 30 years views their neighborhood as, and then the change we're looking to create. And what I've found is that those things marry closer than people think.
Yeah.
The track record was broken on our last project in Killarney, but I was really proud that we'd never had a DP appealed.
Amazing.
We did on this last project, which is currently under construction. I've shared with you.
Yeah.
The appellant was willing to meet with me face to face. We did that through a series of conversations and a tour of our past projects. He actually dropped the appeal prior to taking it to SDAB.
Unreal. Yeah.
And so like that's a specific example of what I just described about how this gap needs to be bridged.
Yeah.
It's bridged through conversations like that of helping to educate people what it means to have a middle development in their community. And so I applaud you for what you're doing. I think it's helping that.
It's cool because exactly what you just talked about in that process is one of the things that I told folks at middle school. I said, you are all fundamentally just neighbors. Like you all own property, but you never owned it with the intent to redevelop it. So I know everyone's like, developers are here to ruin our community. It's like, no, you folks are individuals with faces who should be able to go and have a conversation with your neighbors and understand what are they upset about and talk to them what you're trying to achieve. And I think that's what I'm hoping this can create is an opportunity for more people to have conversations about how their housing needs or their family needs or, small businesses that they're hoping to create and people they're hoping to help foster, new housing for. And so that's awesome, man. I love that approach. Talk to me about the people that you're seeing in these homes, because I think there's a lot of conversation around that. How many vehicles are they having? They all are parking on the streets. Who are your core customers that you're serving for both your secondary suites and your townhomes? Yeah,
I'm glad you asked. I mean, use, not user, right? Mm-hmm. We hear it all the time, particularly in council hearings. I would say this. I mean, this is not often said, but what you hear at a council hearing is not what you hear in face-to-face engagement. Yeah. And so what I would start by saying is that there is absolutely a stigma around what we do. Yeah. And you see that surface through public engagement and DP review processes. The minute I am face-to-face with someone that's objecting or has questions, that conversation softens. So I think as an industry as a whole, especially when you look at your peers in the inner city, we can do a much better job at that.
100%.
And that's your initiative, which I'm happy to be supporting through this middle program. But I guess what I would say is that as it relates to folks that are living in our spaces, it's everyone that you would expect to see among a mixed group of Calgarians, right? And so there's been a lot of change in 4 years, right? Rental values, as we've seen, have increased significantly. That's put pricing pressure, especially on our basement suite tenants. Yeah. But these are still young professionals. There's high demand for it, so we're able to be picky about our placement. But nurses, middle managers, engineers, folks in finance, all in our basement suites. And then in upper townhomes, we actually see a big grouping of folks that are either empty nesters whose kids have moved on to university, and or divorcees that have lived in a much larger home that are looking for a fresh start and want to see brand new product of high quality.
Yeah, it's so cool because you like when you unpack that, it's so multi-generational. And you're hitting such a diverse group of folks who have different needs based on the housing product that you're building, which is why I love this district. And obviously, sometimes my passion gets the best of me when I can't seem to understand why people don't see what we see. And so trying to get better at how to communicate with folks on both sides of the fence. But how do you respond to this idea of like missing middle will never be affordable and you're building in neighborhoods that are not solving affordability? And so I think there was a lot of frustration around like why is everyone trying to throw this in the guise of affordability? And so what's your take on the sector of the market you're serving and this whole concept of affordability?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah.
But the right question to be asking, mm-hmm. right? And if I draw back to an earlier comment, like during the council hearing about the blanket land use redesignation, you saw that woven through much of the commentary that was presented to council. And so the way that I think about this is from a first principles perspective. So what defines affordability for folks? Mm-hmm. Well, it's what I just described. It's the nurse who needs a place to live. She cares about the quality of the space that she's living in. Yeah. But now is looking at paying with us about $1,600 a month. Yeah. If it's a market unit. If it's through the MLI Select program, if it's a affordably designated unit, that amount is much lower. And so in first principles, you really just have to look at what she's pulling home as a gross income every month and then what's going out.
Yeah.
And the reason I make the comment to lead that it's a much bigger conversation is because I think we have to be careful in this moment that our medicine doesn't become the poison.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is that we're driving forward on all these solutions to a proven affordability.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, we're seeing inflation increase. And we're seeing it like even before we started rolling here, we were talking about cost to build, right? I mean, that's a pressure that we see as developers and builders, and it's all around us. And so I'm not going to be able to answer the question fully in the time that we have today, but what I would say is that there are a number of layers of participants that need to be part of that solution. We are part of that solution as a development network. Council and administration at the City of Calgary needs to be part of that solution. But it even bleeds up to some of the decisions we're making federally in terms of our spend that do impact inflation.
For sure.
And that bleeds down right to what we're talking about today, which is for that nurse moving into a basement suite, she cares about gross versus cost.
Yeah, so it's funny because it's multi-jurisdictional, it's multifaceted, and it's going to take an ecosystem of multiple levels of government to come anywhere close to this.
That's a great word.
That's kind of what I've been telling everyone is we need 3.5 million net new homes by 2030 over and above what we've ever built in the history of our country.
Like, it's a little terrifying, right? We know what it takes to build these units.
For sure. And so this is where, for me, I struggle, and I asked you that question because I want everyone's perspective. But, how do we create affordable housing when we can't produce enough market housing? And so for me, we have to get more people involved. We have to figure out more solutions. And it's going to take all of us. And that's what I keep telling people. And that's why I'm really passionate about, we need to mobilize people in community to feel like they are part of the solution. Because to me, that's the only way we actually solve this.
Yeah, I mean, part of the solution that is driving it forward is the CMHC MLI Select program.
Huge.
And specifically what allows us to underwrite risk is the interest rate that is provided through that program in parallel with the affordability requirement. Absent that interest rate, the affordability requirement that's put on title would be difficult to take on.
Well, it's funny, we had Ty and Manj from from
Canada ICI.
Yes. Come out and present at middle school. And I think he said it was over 90% of their loans are CMHC MLI Select. So nothing is technically getting built without that program in place. And so, like you said, the federal government has a huge role to play. The one thing I wanted to ask you out before we take off here is, I've always been stoked about the quality of your homes and how much you care about what you're building. And I am concerned about the quality of the end product as we become making this easier. What are some things that you think that, I could help advocate for, or the city could put in place, or that we could do as an industry to ensure that our finished quality product is meeting the standards of both community and the residents living in them?
Yeah, you and I are aligned in that regard. I have the same concerns. And I think it's at the crux of why people are concerned when they have predominantly lived in a single-family neighborhood and 4 townhomes go up to them, next to them. The quality matters. Fit and finish of interior matters to tenants, but the quality of the exterior, both architecturally and materiality, matters to the people that are living around you.
For sure.
And so the best way I can answer that question is at Curry, we had a set of architectural guidelines. I'll give a shout out to Jesse and Laura Hindle at Hindle Architects because they developed it with us. And that set the standard for what was expected of developers. We could have a guidebook like that for inner city communities. And it would hold developers accountable because that's the risk, right?
100%.
We're all pressing towards solving the solution. You just talked about how many missing middle units need to be created. And the risk is that we do it poorly with product that is not timeless, doesn't last, and decays poorly over time.
Yeah, and so, again, I feel like you're leading me into what Middle's doing because we're working with municipalities to say, if we can achieve this type of outcome, how do we incentivize those players so they get more predictability, could move through the system quicker, could get their building permits in place? Because at the end of the day, a 50 by 120, we all know, has a standard process. If it's a mid-block, we know what that structure needs to look like. If it's a corner, we need to know what that's going to look like. And so I've been really, advocating for better stormwater retention management. So we're not paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to put tanks underground, but maybe we're taking some of that money and putting it into the landscape plan and creating a standardized bioswale system that all of us know what the expectations is and how to deliver it. And so these are some of the things that we're talking about as we talk about how do we build prototypical processes or plans to incentivize a standardized system and good actors. Because I think, we talked about this, building permits taking way too long, safety code officers changing interpretations. And so, as middle becomes new for everybody in the ecosystem, God bless the safety code officers who have seen the overwhelming amount of this product. Sure. I think you're hitting it on the head. Is like, how do we streamline and find those efficiencies and then figure out to create a system that not only we would be happy to support, community is happy with, and administration's happy with.
Yeah, that's what flipped our DP appeal.
Yeah.
Was taking Tom to our other sites and showing him the quality of architecture and fit and finish that we were delivering.
Totally, man. Cool. Well, yeah, I think thanks for coming by. This is super cool. And obviously, I know we chatted, and I'm glad to be a small part of your story and your journey. And it's awesome to see you keep going, man.
Well, you inspired us, and I'm cheering you on.
Thanks, man.